IC-814, the Indian Airlines plane, gets hijacked. I think many people have forgotten that even after the deal was done, one of the hijackers says, we have left a present for you, you India, in the plane. And there's complete panic because the suspicion is there's a bomb.
That's when they found this car with dark windows, so they didn't know who it was that was in the car, but the headlights of the car were on, and somebody was showing bag after bag which was red in color.
Why did Captain Devi Sharan, who was piloting the plane, why did he take off from Amritsar? When the plane was hijacked, the hijackers brought a blood-stained knife to the flight deck, to the cockpit, and said, if you do not take off, we will kill a passenger every 10 minutes.
It's a very difficult choice that the pilot must have had.
Why was the plane not stopped in Amritsar somehow, anyhow? And two, when we think of the dreaded terrorists who were released, Masood Azhar, Mushtaq Zargar, Umar Sheikh, who would go on to harm the interests of India, the rest of the world, could something different have been done? This decision to release terrorists.
This was a plane load of our people sitting in a airport in a country with whom we had no relationship, with a regime that we were not all that familiar or friendly with.
The initial demand from the hijackers was to release 36 Pakistanis in Indian jails.
That's true.
36. Yes. And $200 million in cash. And then it was whittled down to the release of these three men.
Yes. Absolutely.
Terrorists.
Absolutely.
In your book, An Indian Woman in Islamabad, you quote a Pakistani diplomat who says, things between India and Pakistan can be good, they can be bad, but they can never be normal.
Yes.
You were witness to perhaps the most tumultuous period between India and Pakistan, the year of 1999, when when Lahore Declaration, the Lahore Bus journey happens, the Kargil War happens, the military coup that deposes Nawaz Sharif happens, and the hijacking of IC-814 happens. So there's a lot to talk about, and your book is an extraordinary capture of those years. But let's start with asking you whether you ever felt a moment of normalcy in the 3 years you were there between India and Pakistan, or do you agree with the Pakistani diplomat who said, India and Pakistan will forever be locked in this schizophrenia of either having a terrible relationship or an over-sentimentalized one?
Well, I hope that it is not forever. I hope there will be times which are normal between India and Pakistan. After Lahore, it did seem like it was becoming normal, but that was short-lived. And I think that chapter I started with what this Pakistani diplomat had said to my husband about that the relationship can never be normal. And I ended it towards the end. I have a quote, I think, from perhaps Economist or somewhere, where they said that they were trying to be not just a good relationship, but a normal relationship, that let's be normal.
Yeah.
So that's what the objective behind that chapter was, that there was an attempt to make it normal, but that didn't last very long, unfortunately.
When you look back at your time in Pakistan, what was the most challenging time?
I think the Kargil, during the time of Kargil conflict, that was the most difficult time, because we had to send our children to India. We were both in the essential team, so we couldn't, neither of us could have come back. And that was really stressful, to know that, and our children were not very old. So it was very stressful to know that, they are in India, we are here. They were not worried, but we were worried that they might be worried, So that was a difficult time, because there was a time when we thought we'll have to move to the Chancery. Everyone was instructed to keep a bag near the door because it might have to be very sudden. And if worse come to worse, then both Ghanshyam and I would have been in the Chancery building. So that was a very difficult time.
We're marking 25 years since the Kargil victory by the Indian military. Yet there are paradoxes even in a moment of war, and your book captures some of them.
Yes.
For instance, you say at the height of this war, when you and your husband are both part of the essential team, you're in Pakistan when the war is unfolding between India and Pakistan. Your landlord is a Pakistani with a son in the Pakistan army.
That's
the Pakistan army is in Kargil, but that gets acknowledged many years later, not at the time of the war.
No.
He comes to you and he's worried for your safety. Tell us that story.
Well, we had a very good relationship with our landlord,
Khan Saab.
Khan Saab, and I don't even remember his full name. I don't know if I ever knew his full name, but he was a really wonderful man with also a very wonderful family. And because they had converted the old staff quarters into an apartment for themselves, so they frequently came and stayed there. So that was perhaps one of the few families that we knew very intimately. And as it happens, between human beings, and that's one of the things that I want to highlight in this book, that at the human level, we are all human beings. And there is no India-Pakistan at the human level. And so during Kargil, one evening our landlord came home. I was down with some kind of virus, and so we sat in the garden. We didn't sit inside the house. And he suggested that he should post he asked actually, should I send you my gunman to guard you?
So he wanted his private security men to guard you at a time when India and Pakistan were at war.
Exactly.
Now, your book captures a lot of these paradoxes. And, as someone who spent a long time reporting on India-Pakistan, but also whose family is a refugee family originally from Pakistan, I totally get these paradoxes.
Yes.
But they're very difficult to explain to people who haven't experienced them. Because at the level of the state, Pakistan has waged a proxy war against India for decades and continues to do so.
Absolutely.
At the level of people, the human connection can be very real, can be very spontaneous.
Yes.
For instance, your book tells a story about your favorite tailor, your Master Ji, who even at times of friction kept a line open to you, stitched your clothes.
Yes. In fact, I was no longer in touch with him.
Yeah.
And it was a very strange time because Pakistan, terrorists from Pakistan had come into our parliament. And so there was this, it was a very, very tense period between India and Pakistan when the Lahore Delhi bus service was stopped and all kinds of measures were taken by India. And in the middle of that, I get a call from the High Commissioner's wife, who had just returned from Pakistan because we had brought back the families. And she said that I've come back, but I have a packet for you. And that packet was a salwar suit, which she said had been sent by Master Ji. Because I had introduced her to Master Ji, and Master Ji had become like everybody used to go to him. And what was even more interesting is that the next day he made a trunk call, the old-fashioned way. Somebody came on the line and said, I have someone to talk to you. And I was totally surprised. I was not expecting a call from him. And I didn't know who was calling.
Yeah.
And there he was. And he wanted to know if I liked what he had said, if it fitted me, if I wanted anything else. And perhaps this, incidents of this kind are, as you said, they are very difficult to explain or to define, but they bring out the essential relationship at the level of the people. And it's not to say that everybody was good to us. There were moments when people were not really that good to us as well. But that is what, this relationship is like, unlike any other relationship.
So, I think people-to-people contact has become a bit of a cliche. We hear it all the time. People now roll their eyes at it. There is a phrase called Mombatti Walas to capture the peace activists who hold candles at the Wagah border. as somebody who reported on the Kargil War and since then has reported on India-Pakistan, I'm not a pacifist for all situations.
Yes.
But do you actually believe that India and Pakistan can separate the human connection from the state confrontation, from the fact that Pakistan's state policy has used terror as an instrument against India?
Actually, from what we have seen over the years, and this is probably from benefit of hindsight that I can say, that whatever may be happening at the level of the people doesn't seem to have any positive impact at the level of the official relationship.
That's right.
And the cross-border terrorism continues regardless of whether you have good people-to-people level contacts or no people-to-people level contacts. So perhaps the two are separate in a way.
Yeah.
And we have to recognize that we shouldn't get carried away by, there is an official level of the relationship that we have to deal with. And that need not necessarily reflect the warmth that exists at the level of the people.
Your book captures that moment when Atal Bihari Vajpayee, then Prime Minister, goes to the Minar-e-Pakistan.
Yes.
And in the sort of guest book, he writes there how
Yes.
he, as the Prime Minister of India, would want to see
Yes.
a stable Pakistan. And you very rightly say that for a party that ideologically stood for an Akhand Bharat,
Yes.
this was a big moment. Former Army Chief General Malik, he has written elsewhere that these peace initiatives between India and Pakistan, the military was not really consulted on them. And looking back, questions are asked even till today. Was the Lahore Declaration, was that bus ride that Vajpayee took to Lahore a mistake? Kargil came, 5 weeks later? The planning of Kargil was 5 weeks later. Today, as you look back,
Yes.
do you believe the Lahore bus was a mistake?
I don't think so.
Why?
Because, as I said, there is at one level a relationship that is very difficult. But that's not the entirety of Pakistan. There is a very large segment which may not be able to influence the decisions or the policies of the government of Pakistan today.
Yeah.
But there is a very large segment that may not necessarily be flowing along the same current. So it is important that from time to time, India has made its desire for good relations with Pakistan, for stability and peace in Pakistan. That has been made obvious. So from that perspective, and I don't think that we'll see something happening today or tomorrow, maybe not even in my lifetime. But things like this, I think they have to be seen in a very, very long term perspective.
So you support the continuous attempt to reach somewhere?
I support the attempt to reach somewhere, but it doesn't have to be continuous. I think from time to time we have to make
like right
obvious.
now,
Yes.
there is a kind of, I would say deep freeze.
Yes.
But Prime Minister Modi also tried. He
Also
invited,
tried.
the SARC leaders to
Yes.
his first swearing in. He dropped by, unannounced to meet Nawaz Sharif
Yes.
on his birthday.
Yes.
These attempts have been made.
Absolutely.
And then we have had Pulwama, Uri,
Yes.
Balakot, and now a kind of period of, I won't say non-engagement, but for all effective purposes, non-engagement. Is this a healthier way? Some have actually said that India has reached a point where not just is the relationship de-hyphenated, so this India-Pakistan nomenclature in the global discourse has gone, but that India should spend less energy on Pakistan than it has traditionally. What do you say?
I think the reason we can have the policy that we have today and not have to explain it is because attempts like those made by Prime Minister Vajpayee and Prime Minister Modi are there in our past. If we didn't have them, then current policy would be questioned much, much more. And people would, it would be harder for us to explain why we are
That's
doing what
interesting.
we
That
are
you're
doing.
saying that we look like the country that tried everything.
Yes.
And then decided, okay, no more.
Okay, at least for now, okay, no more. If tomorrow they change their mind and they stop following a policy of cross-border terrorism for whatever reason, because ultimately it's also in Pakistan's interest not to follow that kind of a policy or that kind of an approach towards India. So things can change. But for now, that seems to be the obvious.
So in this eventful year of 1999, when you are posted as a diplomat in Islamabad, IC-814, the Indian Airlines plane, gets hijacked. And that chapter in the book has been written by your husband.
That's right.
Who was actually sent by the High Commission to be in Kandahar as the negotiations were happening to get the passengers released. Now, it's a riveting chapter, not least because I think many people have forgotten that even after the deal was done, one of the hijackers says, we have left a present for you, you India, in the plane. This is when the terrorists have been released, the passengers have been released, the deal is over, it's all winding down. And there's complete panic because the suspicion is there's a bomb that's been left behind in the plane that still has to fly back to India. And then comes the sort of crazy attempt to find this red bag. Tell us that story.
Well, that's a story that would be best
told by your husband, but he's not here.
But he's not here. He's in Bangalore. But the thing is that there was this message which somehow reached Mr. Ajit Doval and also the team, that there is a special present for India which is going to be made known at night, at midnight. So all of these people were asked to stay away from the plane. But one of the pilots was, refusing to leave. He was trying out because the next day they would have to fly it. But so when they went in search of that pilot, that's when they found this car with dark windows, so they didn't know who it was that was in the car, but the headlights of the car were on, and somebody was showing bag after bag which was red in color to this bag. And before leaving, Ghanshyam made an attempt to get hold of that bag, asked about it, but of course nobody or nothing was forthcoming, and eventually he left.
And that bag was never found?
No.
Though there was some talk that somebody had found a bag with 5 grenades in it.
Well, there was some talk that a bag was found. We don't know what was in that bag. The bag was eventually found and taken away. But we don't know what was in that bag, and we never got hold of that bag.
Now two questions have always been asked about IC-814, and one of them is asked in your book. Why did Captain Devi Sharan, who was piloting the plane, why did he take off from Amritsar? Why did he just not stay put at Amritsar? Equally, the question has been asked, why did the authorities here not do anything to just block the plane from taking off? And your book has his account, the pilot's account, which he's sharing with one of the officials in the government contingent. And he says that when the plane was hijacked, the hijackers brought a blood-stained knife to the flight deck, to the cockpit, and said, if you do not take off, we will kill a passenger every 10 minutes.
Absolutely. So, in fact, it's a very difficult choice that the pilot must have had. And those of us who were not in his position perhaps cannot judge the correctness or whether there was any other option available to him at that point. Suffice it to say that didn't happen. I think that's where we'll have to leave it, because only he could have said, and only he knows what kind of pressures that he was in at that point of time.
But we saw an extraordinary moment, and I'll tell you on a lighter side a story about myself. I was a young reporter then. I had just finished covering the Kargil War, and this was kind of my beat. And we had got to know that Jaswant Singh was going to, go to Kandahar, and these 3 terrorists, including Masood Azhar, were going to be released in exchange for the safety of these passengers. Now, they were taking off from the technical airport in Delhi, and there was no way, there was very tight security. There was no way to get inside. The media was all outside. I found a small Maruti van. In those days, we had Maruti vans, and it was taking boxes of packed food that were going to go on the plane for the Indian contingent to have on the way. And I hid in that van, at the back of that van, hid among the boxes of sandwiches, managed to reach the tarmac. Was actually getting ready to climb up the steps when Mr. Jaswant Singh found me there and said, Barkha, what are you doing here? Yes, I know you want to come, but you cannot go back. And by that time, the rest of the media had started fighting outside. How did she get in? How did she get in? And of course, I was sent packing back. So it's a story I always hold dear. But on a more serious note. Now, that's on a lighter note, that story. But on a more serious note, the questions persist. And the questions are, why was the plane not stopped in Amritsar somehow, anyhow? And two, when we think of the dreaded terrorists who were released, Masood Azhar, Mushtaq Zargar, Umar Sheikh, who would go on to harm the interests of India, the rest of the world, could something different have been done? This decision to release terrorists, I know the government did not have an easy choice. I know it was a Hobson's choice. But when you look back at it, could something different have been done?
I don't know if anything different could have been done, though, like every other Indian, I would also be hoping and wishing that, we didn't have to do it, because the challenges that have been faced by us as a result of this have been quite enormous. But I always like to try and see, putting myself in the place of the people who were taking the decision.
Yeah.
And when I think of that, I feel that this was a plane load of our people sitting in a airport and in a country with whom we had no relationship, with a regime that we were not all that familiar or friendly with. And the number of demands which they received to start with, compared to that this was a massively scaled down version of, and it is possible that they felt through the negotiations that there was no way to go any further, to get any further.
That's an important point, because when I read the book, either I didn't know this or I had forgotten it. The initial demand from the hijackers was to release 36 Pakistanis in Indian jails.
That's true.
36.
Yes.
And $200 million in cash. And then it was whittled down to the release of these three men.
Yes. Absolutely.
Terrorists.
Absolutely.
And you're right that India did not have a relationship with the Taliban at that time. The book very rivetingly describes, sitting in the air traffic control tower of Kandahar. Your husband is there.
Yes.
Then the Indian delegation arrives, Ajit Doval, Vivek Karjo among them. These negotiations happen.
Yes.
And eventually what happens. Do you think that this story could have ended in an alternative way? For example, we have countries like America that statedly say we don't negotiate with terrorists.
Yeah.
But they do manage to get high-profile prisoner swaps.
Yes.
So do you think this is just a slogan? We don't negotiate with terrorists?
I really don't know if this is just a slogan or if there are things that happen behind the scene that we are not privy to. But in this case, I mean, I think it's very difficult for us to feel the pressures that they were in. I know that when Ghanshyam first went and they threatened to kill passengers, he was alone at that time, but he didn't take it lightly.
Yeah.
It wasn't like this is just something you shrug off. And he actually
and one passenger was killed.
Yes. So he was actually worried that that they just might start doing it.
Yeah.
So they had killed a passenger. There was, there was surely some uncertainty about whether they would or they wouldn't repeat that. So it's even with hindsight, I wish that there was a different outcome, but I don't know if they could have managed a different outcome.
Let's talk about Dwood Ibrahim. You talk about arriving in Pakistan, going to Karachi for the first time, discovering that Karachi doesn't have Karachi halwa. This is something that Indians, this is a meetha that Indians refer to.
Yes.
But also going through the Clifton area where everybody routinely says, wo dekho Dawood ka ghar.
Yes.
For decades now,
India
has believed that Dwood Ibrahim sought refuge in Pakistan.
Yeah.
Why do you think that we were never able to okay, we were obviously never going to be able to expatriate him, but we were never able to, in a sense, nail that in the public domain, place it before the world to see. We've given many dossiers, but why is Dwood Ibrahim so important to Pakistan? Like, why have they invested so much energy in protecting Dwood Ibrahim?
That's a very good question, and I don't know if I have actually got an answer for you. But the fact is that they have never acknowledged his presence.
Yeah.
The fact
Not even in back, like when you all meet.
No. And unless you were in Karachi, nobody ever really talked about him. Yeah. And in private conversations, I don't know whether people in Islamabad, for instance, were very conscious. I mean, they may have been aware. But
like Javed Miandad is related by marriage to Dwood Ibrahim. So he's not a ghost. He exists.
That was, of course, much later. But at that time also, there was some Lahore-based actress. There were some newspaper reports about that. But in Islamabad, he wasn't a subject matter of conversation, and people weren't really... maybe because more people from Lahore rather than from Karachi, but even people from Karachi that I knew didn't really talk about him. I think the world believes what it wants to believe. So whether somebody, whether it is India not being able to nail it, or whether it's the decision, I mean, it's not important enough for others to believe it. That's a question that I think I would just leave.
Like, did you ever hear like crazy stories about Dwood Ibrahim, or would no one talk about him at all?
No, there was never any mention of him.
At all? Like there was, like he was not a dining table sort of subject of conversation?
Not at all. He never figured in the conversation.
Now let's come to the intractable question of the nuclear overhang. Prior to, I would say, Balakot, where a kind of new red lines were redrawn, the red lines were redrawn, there was always this argument that any conflict between India and Pakistan, you have to calibrate it such that it's below the nuclear threshold.
Yes.
You have witnessed the sort of reactions that happened in the immediate aftermath of sort of India and Pakistan going nuclear. And your book talks very interestingly about that. Can you talk about that time?
Actually, the nuclear issue is again, it's, I think like most things about Pakistan, there's always two sides to the story. So though I have not written about it in the book, but while in Pakistan, I heard more than once people of consequence actually, at least two occasions that I can remember, though I don't want to take the names of the people because they're both alive, they spoke about the fact that using the nuclear weapon was not Islamic, or this was a deterrence.
Yeah.
It's while officially there is no such statement, but in private, when you talk to people once or twice, that we spoke to people about it, because people don't not necessarily talk about that with the Indian diplomats. But the response would be that, this is not something that they can use, that Pakistan can use, but it is more for deterrence. So with that, I mean, this, talk about being on the nuclear threshold or nuclear flashpoint, I mean, I would...
Do you ever believe that India and Pakistan have come close to the danger, not to nuclear conflict, but to the danger of a nuclear conflict? And I ask this because, Kashmir in the old times was described in Western media often as a nuclear flashpoint between India and Pakistan. That was the kind of Western media cliche.
Yes.
But do you actually believe that our countries have ever come close to the danger of that escalation?
Those such claims have been made, but I didn't, even during Kargil, we didn't feel that this is where it's heading, because it was not even a full-fledged war between the two countries. It was restricted. And I remember there was reading an article by a former a retired general of the Pakistan Army, where he wrote about how India and Pakistan have never bombed civilian areas even during war. So I don't know if Pakistan would, but you can't really take that.
But that's such
risk.
an important point that you've just made, especially in the context of what's happened after the Hamas terror attack with Israel and Gaza.
Yeah.
I always quote India battling terrorism from Pakistan.
Yes.
And I'm not saying, I'm sure when near the line of control, civilians die on our side, civilians are killed on their side in firing that takes place between the armies. But India has never bombed an area which is heavily populated. Yeah. And that is such an important point that you've just made.
Yeah, that's true. Though, when nuclear weapons are, even if they are in the background, you have to factor them in while making your... So at the end of the day, that's why it is important that we should have a peaceful relationship with each other. It's in the interest of both countries.
Let me talk just for a moment, and then we'll talk about the title of your book, Being a Woman in Islamabad. The current situation. Like, look at, in Pakistan, everything that you see, you feel you've seen it once before.
Yes.
There's always it's a perennial state of deja vu. But some things are quite extraordinary even for that. You've had a former ISI chief now taken into custody.
Yes.
You have a former prime minister behind bars. Chalo, that is normal.
Yeah.
But where is Pakistan in a way deriving its, some would say, audacity from? Your book quotes an old interview Benazir Bhutto does with, I think, Sham Bhatia, where she says Musharraf had this crazy idea that one day he could capture Srinagar.
Yeah.
And she was not convinced of the cogency of his plans.
Yes.
That perhaps he hoped to do the same with the Kargil crazy misadventure of his. But when you look at Pakistan today, you look at the rich billionaire military generals, you look at the kind of internal meltdown.
Yeah.
Does an imploding Pakistan suit India's national interests, or does, as Vajpayee had first argued, a stable Pakistan suit India's national interests?
I have tried to, that's the, in my final chapter, that's what I have tried to touch upon. Imploding Pakistan cannot be in India's interest, because chaos and conflict and, things going down the tube cannot but have an impact on India. Yeah. It's a long land border that we have, but there is also all kinds of relationship between people. People are married from here into families in Pakistan and vice versa. So it is not in India's interest for Pakistan to implode. And what I felt while being in Pakistan was that things may look bad, but still they seem to move on. I mean, it seems to be that they are on the verge of, really getting into trouble, but somehow they manage to
keep going.
Yeah, keep going. And that's,
What is the one thing that you learned in Pakistan that changed your assumption about Pakistan before you got there?
The one thing which I think I have learned from staying there is not to take things at face value. So if you were to talk about India-Pakistan relations and you look at how they have progressed and what is the official status of ties between the two countries, you will make a misjudgment. Because when you live there, you realize how warm people can be towards you. Of course, there'll be people who come and give you a long lecture about, things which India is doing which are wrong, or human rights violations, things like that people will come and talk to you about. But at the personal level, even strangers can really surprise you with their warmth and kindness. And I think that's what I have learned from there, that you have to actually try and dig deeper.
And you have this warmth coexisting with dangers of radicalization,
Yes.
people killed in the name of blasphemy. Politicians, I think you talk at one point about Mushahid Hussain dropping by at the Lashkar-e-Taiba
Absolutely.
headquarters, the complete sort of mainstreaming of, jihadist violence, as it
Yes.
were. This dichotomy of Pakistan, if you were to explain it to somebody, I mean, it's perplexing, even to those of us who followed it for many years.
Yeah.
How would you explain it?
It is actually very difficult to explain because you can see two sides of the picture in Pakistan for almost everything. But to me, it seems that this is a lot to do with the Pakistan Army's desire, for want of a better word, to control and remain in power, either directly or indirectly, and to continue the system which actually benefits people in the army. And in fact, I remember people talking about it in private and asking, why does Pakistan need such a strong army?
Yeah.
Where do we have the challenges that we need such a strong army? And I think that is one of the factors. There may be more, but that, at least to me, that seemed to be the major factor.
Let me end with the title of your book, An Indian Woman in Islamabad.
Yes.
And I know, as we were talking earlier, that people have said, why didn't you just say an Indian diplomat in Islamabad?
Yes.
I'm sure there was a gendered experience
Yes.
at being,
Yes.
right, being female in Islamabad in some of the toughest, most dramatic years of conflict and tension between India and Pakistan.
Yeah.
So talk about that.
Well, it is, that's a question which people have asked me, why I call it an Indian woman rather than an Indian diplomat. And my answer is always that it is a story that has been told from a woman's perspective. And one has to, I mean, even a common thing like, if we had to go to the Chancery building during Kargil, there were lots of other male staff, the security and gardeners and other people who were staying there. So there were showers, there were bathrooms. The toilets were not a problem. We had toilets for officers and for visitors, so there would have been no shortage. But I, being a woman, I had to think, okay, where will I take a shower when I have to shower?
Yeah.
Because those are common showers where all the other men are going. So one does have to think about being, as a woman, what your life is going to be like. When our children went to Delhi during Kargil, obviously I could not be with them because I was working.
Yeah.
And so it's definitely a woman's story.
I think at one point you say that as a working woman, you also had to, you were also bothered with calls about pani khatam ho gaya hai, the water is, but
Yes.
these are the realities.
It's a reality. When you work, if you have a, time-bound deadline or something, I mean, your child may be having high fever, but you have to deliver on the deadline. You have to find a way to do that. And that's not just my story. That's the story of every working woman, that there are challenges of managing a career and its demands, along with the challenges of running a home. But also, I have tried to bring about the issues that women in Pakistan face. And therefore, I think it should have been called.
I agree. But did you also have problems being, how the Pakistani establishment, did they take you initially less seriously because you were female?
Well, I think that's a challenge that women generally face, that they are underestimated at face value. And I have always felt that I should not get disheartened when that happens, because that's an advantage. Because if
You can surprise them.
When you are dealing with someone, you have to be able to assess them correctly.
Correct.
And if they underestimate you, they start off with a disadvantage.
That's right.
Whereas you have assessed them correctly. So it's an advantage to a woman if somebody underestimates them.
Yeah, that's well put. Let me end by asking you, when you close your eyes and you think of your defining memory from Pakistan, what is it?
Well, I think if we had to do that, I would always remember the good times that we had. It was very challenging, no doubt. Working in Islamabad was not easy, but it was we had a close mission. All the officers and families, they got along well with each other. We had good friendships that have survived these years of our nomadic life, and good memories of people that one came across.
Well, I think amidst all the tension, personal relationships should and do survive. And that's true. And that is, as you said, about the human connection. Ambassador Ruchi Ghanshyam, author of An Indian Woman in Islamabad. Thank you so much for talking to us.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you.
Thank you.